Despite the importance of the day, Patrick decided to sleep in. Protests in the streets outside his apartment were loud enough to disrupt his sleep to the point where he couldn't ignore it. After years in the military serving in special operations in South America and Southeast Asia, Patrick was tired of living through historical events, but it seems as though his country was a part of it every year. Patrick exited his apartment where he drove to the state capitol and weaved his way through the protesters outside the building before entering.
Guess we got to get used to this, hey, Pat?
Greg said as he was waiting for him.
Yeah, well, at first I thought that I'd rather be dodging protesters in the U.S. than bullets in El Salvador, so it can't be that bad. But after having some lady yell in my face, I'm not so sure anymore.
If only she was in El Salvador. That way your walk to the office would have been a lot more pleasant.
That's one way of looking at it. So, Greg, were you able to get me that meeting?
Pat, what's the point? The war has started. We invaded Egypt 3 hours ago. You really think you'll convince them now that it's a bad idea?
So you didn't get me the meeting.
I got you the meeting, but I didn't tell them that it was because you were against it.
Oh, that's great. So what did you tell them? That I wanted to have a meeting with them to show a picture of a dog I saw yesterday?
Listen, I just told him you wanted to talk. But Pat, why are you doing this anyway? You came back a hero, and for your efforts, you just have to sit back, pose for the cameras, to let the public think you're doing the best to serve your country as an advisor and collect the checks.
Except nobody takes my advice.
Because you're not an advisor. You work for the government, not to help politicians. Your job is to let the American people know that Patrick O'Brien, the American hero, that bravely brought down 12 Indonesian targets in Malaysia to save his fellow comrades, is now helping the government become a stronger nation. The people now have more trust in the government than they had before.
Yeah, it sure looks like it.
Pat replied sarcastically while pointing to the protesters outside.
Anyway, your meeting is in 15 minutes, and I'm late.
Greg and Pat parted ways. Patrick waited outside of the office. Since his return from his deployment, he has been deemed a hero. But the memories of what he did haunts him. The image of a little Indonesian girl looking up at him hurts his soul. But it keeps showing up whenever he closes his eyes. He finally had a meeting with the heads of state to criticize them rather than to get a pat on the back and a remark about what a hero he is. He knew they were just bullshitting him. But a soldier does is to take orders, and Pat was ordered to smile and say thank you.
Mr. O'Brien, they're ready for you.
Patrick entered the room. It was large and rectangular shape, with a long table in the middle of the room filled with the current administration. Even Congress was there.
Have a seat,
said one of the men. He sat at the end of the table, even though he had the presence of an authority figure, especially amongst the head of state that were sitting around him. Pat didn't know who he was and has never seen him before since he started working at the Capitol.
So what did you want to talk about, son?
Well, I guess I'll get right to it. I am aware that our invasion of Egypt began this morning, and I might be too late to change anything, but I just feel as though this is a huge mistake. We are going to strain ties with our allies, and our people are going to lose faith in the government, not to mention the amount of innocent people that are going to die. Wars cost billions of dollars. I feel as though we are spending billions of dollars to hurt ourselves.
There was a long pause. None of the members spoke. Instead, they all turned their heads to the man at the head of the table who sat across from Patrick.
Son, do you know why we are in Egypt?
I think I know.
The truth is, there are terrorist regimes that have to be taken out. I have reports from soldiers that the Egyptian people are mighty happy that our troops are there.
There also so happens to be an abundance of rare minerals called phyla that are essential for AI and energy production that were discovered 1 month before our media decided that the leader of Egypt was a terrorist that posed a threat to our way of life. I hate to be so confrontational, but there are other ways we could get our hands on this stuff without destroying a country. I mean, look at the protesters outside. They are not oblivious to what is happening.
The man with his elbows on the table started to rub his hand in his fist and thought for a moment.
You're not a stupid guy, Pat, and I owe you the truth. Those minerals may have something to do with it, but maybe we just care about saving other people from tyrannical governments.
Pat looked around at the table. He noticed that nobody else was saying anything. These are the leaders of the country, and yet they all yield their time to this man that Pat hasn't even seen before, that perhaps nobody has really seen before. Pat felt uneasy.
Well, I guess I was wrong. I am sorry for the confusion.
No problem.
Pat got up and thanked them for their time.
By the way, what is your name?
John,
And what do you do here?
There was a long pause.
I'm a patriot.
Pat nodded his head and turned towards the door. Sarah was nervous. I'm a robotics engineer, not a public speaker, she thought, and now I have to do a presentation in front of high-ranking officials. As she was preparing in the back room, one of the secretaries approached her.
Sarah, how are you doing?
Little nervous, but I think I'm ready.
Don't worry about the presentation. Congress is already looking to fund the program regardless. You're just here to convince the people watching that it is safe. You should know, though, there are a few areas they want you to avoid, specifically about the phyla mineral. I'm not sure if it is a part of your presentation, but we advise you to not bring up anything regarding the minerals that are used for any robotics used. Due to the political tensions currently unfolding, we find it best to leave out anything that could be a detriment to your project today. So, a polarizing topic such as minerals could be seen as a supporter of the war in Egypt. And obviously, if you look out the window, you can see why that can hurt your goals today.
I understand. And there isn't any mention of minerals of any kind in my project.
Okay, great. Well, good luck then.
Sarah didn't support the war. Any military intervention anywhere she opposed. But she also knew that geopolitics isn't her area and decided to stay out of it. She was grateful for being an American and the opportunities it brings, especially for her profession. She wasn't going to let it affect the presentation. Patrick left the room and felt like leaving the planet. Pat went into the meeting with intentions of saving lives and now felt as if his own was in jeopardy. Pat decided to look for Greg. Clearly, Greg was right, he thought. It's best I know my place rather than push the boundaries that aren't mine to push. As Patrick was walking by, he heard a presentation in front of the Congress. He decided to walk in to see if Greg was nearby to admit that he was right. "Please take a seat," one of the guards said.
I know, I just need to find my friend.
"Sir, please sit," the guard said again. Patrick reluctantly sat and watched the presentation about the future of robotics.
God, this woman is struggling. She looks way too nervous.
He thought.
Oh my God, what am I even saying?
Sarah was panicking on stage. If she was selling water to a man dying of thirst, she would still somehow manage to blow the sales pitch.
Any questions?
The moderator asked. The crowd was silent.
I have one.
Excuse me, I meant for governing officials only.
I am a governing official. How much of AI engineering uses the phyla mineral, and how important is it to the construction of artificial intelligence?
Sarah was startled. She started mumbling. It was almost like she was speaking a new language. She was struggling enough just doing the presentation, and now she has to answer a question that was told specifically to avoid. At that moment, she found a new respect for politicians.
Our presenter here today is only going to answer questions that are related to her presentation, and as far as I remember, she didn't bring up minerals, so let's move on.
Patrick decided to wait until questioning was over. He walked up to Sarah.
Hey, listen, I'm sorry for asking that question out of nowhere. I know it was a touchy subject, and I shouldn't have put you in that position.
No, it's fine. It was my fault. I just have such a hard time in front of people. And to answer your question, phyla is very important for robotics.
How so?
Well, for regular robotics like OpenAI or a self-driving car, it's not that essential. But for hacking, it is valuable.
I didn't realize AI can be used to hack.
Well, that's really what makes AI so vital. When artificial intelligence was first being introduced, the big questions the government cared about was its ability to spy. Have you heard the expression, "The future is here, is just not evenly distributed"?
Yes, William Gibson.
Right. Well, I am not sure what future the higher-ups are working with, but I am certain they are all artificial intelligence, and not just for picking up heavy equipment.
Patrick did recall his time in the military using items such as metamaterials that are engineered materials that allow them to control waves like light, sound, or radio waves in ways that natural materials can't. The military used it for invisibility cloaking, antennas, and medical imaging. Yet it isn't used in the public.
And also, guessing by your question, I'm assuming that you oppose this war.
Yes, I do.
I do as well. And I don't want you to think that because my profession benefits from it, that I advocate for militaries to invade foreign nations. I'd gladly trade my profession if it means that cities don't get obliterated. That's why I have actually found an alternative method that not only can be a substitute for Fila, but also a better replacement, and it doesn't require any materials. I was going to present this today, but they were adamant not to bring up materials.
Patrick suddenly felt concerned.
Let's talk outside.
Patrick said, and quickly escorted Sarah out of the building. Once Sarah and Patrick made their way outside and down a walkway, Patrick began talking.
They'll never let you present those materials. I had to drag you out because what you were bringing up could be dangerous.
What do you mean?
Listen, there are a few things I learned during my time in combat. Oliver Stone once stated that the first death of war is the truth. It is clear that we are not invading Egypt because we care so much about combating terrorism. We are there for the Fila minerals, so what you said was very dangerous. Have you heard the expression, business is war? Well, there's another one. War is business. Government spending, manufacturing of steel, iron, coal to make ships, planes, weapons, and of course, missiles, food production, energy production, cheap land for businesses to buy up. Do you know what got the world out of the biggest depression of all time? The biggest war of all time. Sure, during the Great Depression, FDR passed the Bank Act in 1933 that recovered the economy for 2 years, but shortly after the economy took another downturn, and then the Second World War happened.
So this is more to it than Fila.
Yes, but the Fila material does have a role to play. One of the largest donors to Congress is an overseas mining company. If they capture a hold of those mines in Egypt, they'll have a stranglehold on the market, but it'll only be sold to the allies of the states.
And then used to infiltrate those who dare to compete with it.
Because Fila is vital for AI hacking, if the rest of the world doesn't have it and one country does, then that country would rule the world. Imagine if one country had all the nuclear weapons and the rest of the world had none. The biggest thing that prevents a country from dropping a nuke on another one is mutual assured destruction. But that doesn't work if one country has all the nukes.
With Fila, you won't need nukes.
Look, you can't do it here, but if we found a way to get your discovery to other nations, we could possibly save the world.
You think our government is going to try to end the world?
No, but if it gets into the wrong hands, it will. The greatest invention for world peace was nuclear weapons. It has prevented so many major wars, but not because it was in the hands of someone good, but because it was in everyone's hands. AI hacking should be in everyone's hands to save the world. You need to get your information to other nations and do it secretly. No one can know that you have anything to do with it.
Sarah was now really scared. Who would have thought that her presentation wasn't even the worst part of her day, she thought. John was sitting in a dark room with other mysterious men who appear very powerful and superior to John.
Everything clear?
Asked one of the men.
Yes, I spoke with the group today. Spending has increased and conscription may be coming sooner than we thought.
Excellent.
However, I finally decided to meet with O'Brien, and of course he voiced his concern.
Will he be a concern?
I don't know. It seemed as though he believed that there was more to this war than Fila.
Well, the other economic benefits of war isn't too secretive. He isn't the only one talking about this.
No, I mean, it seemed as though there was something deeper than all the economic motive.
There was a long pause, and finally one spoke.
Did you see him talk to anybody afterwards?
My team had cameras on him. He was seen leaving the Capitol building with Sarah Dunne, a robotics engineer.
The one with the terrible presentation?
Yes, or so I heard. It was terrible.
Well, O'Brien was a brave hero who saw what a lot of men shouldn't see. Perhaps his trauma is too much for him to handle and decide it's best to put himself to rest and to take along someone with him. Can we all agree with that?
The men agreed.
Let's get this done sooner than later, John.
Will do.
Sarah was driving home, anxious, but somehow exhausted. She still doesn't know what to make of Patrick's suggestion. She didn't sign up for this. She just wanted to build things, not do top-secret missions that dictates the social order of the world. She couldn't wait to get home, relieve some stress, and forget about all this. Sarah slammed the brakes on her car. She was too much in her own mind and almost hit someone crossing the street. She looked in the rear view to wave to the car behind her, acknowledging her mistake. She couldn't see the driver inside but assumed that they saw her apologizing. Sarah continued to drive down the street, now more focused on the road. She looked in her rear-view mirror again and saw the same car behind her. Sarah was starting to panic. She continued down the street and went into an underground parking lot. She drove her car behind a line of parked cars and waited. The suspense was killing her, but she knew she had to be patient. She waited for a moment, then she saw the car roll in. Sarah was out of sight from the vehicle, but she could still see the car. Totally black, with tinted windows. It didn't park, nor was it looking for a parking spot. It just sat there in the parking lot with the engine running. The car then started moving slowly around the parking lot, going past all the empty parking spaces. It couldn't be more clear to Sarah. She was being followed. Sarah needed to get to her apartment. She drove her car around the parking lot to the exit. As expected, the car quickly pulled in behind her. Sarah was now waiting to drive into the intersection. She waited. Even when there was time to merge, she waited. She saw a bus driving by and knew this was her moment. She waited until the bus was about to drive past and last second decided to pull in, cutting the bus off. She was now speeding up. She looked in her side mirror and saw the black car was now passing the bus. Sarah was driving faster than she's driven before, but the black car was still catching up. Sarah decided now was the moment. She slammed on the brakes and steered into another underground parking lot in a random building. The car slammed on the brakes, but had too much inertia, and drove past the entrance. Sarah drove 2 more levels downward and parked her car. It was time. She got out of her car and hid on the other side of the parking lot and waited. The car arrived and parked right in front of her parked vehicle. The doors opened and out came 2 men.
It seems like this is her building. Let's head inside and look for her there. If we see her inside, just wait until she goes in her room to find out where she lives.
Sarah waited for the men to enter the building and then scattered up the levels of the parking lot back onto the street. She didn't have a lot of time. She was 5 blocks away from her apartment and had to be there before the men realized she sent them on a ruse. Sarah made it to her apartment. She immediately locked her door and started dialing. A hand smacked her phone down with, and the other hand around her mouth. Sarah was screaming, but no one could hear her. Her voice was muffled by the hand covering her mouth. This is it, she thought. This is how it ends.
Sarah, relax, it's me.
What are you doing here? How do you know where I live?
You can't call anybody. Your phone is bugged. This place might be bugged, that's why we have to leave right now.
What is happening? What is going on?
I'll explain later. Right now we have to leave.
What?
There are going to be men coming to this apartment if they aren't already on the way.
They were just following me. I lead them to a hotel 5 blocks away around 10 minutes ago.
There was a knock at the door. Sarah and Patrick paused. The knocking continued.
Don't answer.
The knocking stopped. Then suddenly, the power went out.
Hide.
The door was now unlocked and was slowly opening. The 2 same men that were chasing Sarah earlier were now creeping in the apartment with their guns drawn. One checked the bedroom, while the other checked the bathroom. When Patrick heard one of the men entering the bathroom, he moved the shower curtain away, hopped out of the bathtub, and attacked the man. Patrick knew the other perpetrator heard the clash, so he quickly knocked his opponent out. The other perpetrator was entering the bathroom. Sarah, quickly thinking on her feet, saw the gun on the floor, jumped out of the bathtub, and tossed it to Patrick. Without hesitation, Patrick fired 3 shots, taking the second man out.
We gotta get out of here. Their superior is waiting for a confirmation tonight, and once they find out what has happened, we'll be on a terrorist watch list.
Sarah was in shock.
No time to pack. The power is still out, meaning we have to leave before the cameras turn on.
What is happening? Why is this happening?
Listen to me. We have a plane waiting for us. I was able to pull some strings and got some people to get us a flight out of here from a private military base. That way, no one will be waiting for us. Once we're off the ground, I'll explain everything.
Where are we going?
Patrick picked up a rag on the floor and used it to clean the blood off his face.
Egypt.
So they're missing?
Yes, but we know where they're going.
How did they get away?
O'Brien is an elite soldier, a killing machine that we created, and the woman may be a nervous wreck at times, but she isn't stupid. As a matter of fact, she's quite brilliant. This pairing is more capable than anticipated.
Listen, John, we are expecting a lot from you. This should have been handled last night. We all were expecting to turn on the TV and see the report that the beloved Patrick O'Brien lost his fucking marbles and decided to murder a promising young woman before turning the gun on himself.
Well, I'll give you one better. Beloved hero died bravely in battle, saving a promising young woman from savage Egyptians working for the tyrannical dictator.
Well, if you're so confident, John, and so certain that you're going to redeem yourself, I'd suggest you get your ass to Egypt.
So I was doomed from the start.
Yes, once you discovered you didn't need Fila for AI hacking, you were a danger to the agenda of the powers that be.
So they didn't ask me to go to Washington for my presentation. It was to kill me. Was my presentation really that bad?
Patrick laughed at Sarah's self-deprecating joke. It gave him relief that she was handling the situation well.
How did you know they were coming after me?
I've been vocal to the administration about my displeasure of the war, but have never stated it publicly, meaning to the American people. But I had a meeting with them the day of your presentation, and I felt this tension. Like every official had a bomb strapped to their chest, and this one man at the end of the table had the detonator. Through my time in war, your gut instinct is your most reliable source. Many lives have been saved by valuing what your gut has to say than your superior officer. And my gut was telling me that I was walking a very dangerous path. And when you told me about your discovery, it all clicked.
The plane was getting bumpy, which meant that they were close to the landing zone. It was 10 hours since they left Washington, which meant that the manhunt has begun.
I thought Egypt was no-fly zone.
It is. We're flying to Israel, then driving to Egypt.
Pat, if we're on a terrorist watch list, then how can we trust the pilot or your contacts in the Middle East?
Frankie and I fought alongside each other in Malaysia. He was one of the men involved during my Medal of Honor battle. Ever since then, he's waiting to help me for something like this.
It pays to be a hero.
Patrick hated that word hero. If only the world knew what so-called heroic act he did. Patrick kept seeing that little girl's face. He didn't know why his subconscious kept displaying her face in his mind, but whenever it did, Patrick felt like screaming it out of his head. He clearly blocked out the memory. It must have been too much for him to handle, and he forced himself to forget about it. The plane landed in Tel Aviv. Sarah and Patrick left the airport and met the contact outside. It was an Arabic man.
Ahad, come quick.
The contact said, as he opened the car doors, waving them to come in. Sarah and Patrick hurried in the vehicle and then made their way to Egypt.
You should have this.
What is it?
Ostrich feather. It represents truth and justice in ancient Egypt, and I shall give it to those who seek it.
Patrick accepts his gift.
Thank you.
How was the trip?
It was good. How's the war going so far?
Terrible. Many homes destroyed, lives ruined.
All this for some minerals, hey?
I think there is more to it than minerals in Egypt.
What do you mean?
Well, I have only seen one mine here for digging minerals, but it seems like their attention is pointed to somewhere else.
So Egypt really has a dictator here.
The man started laughing.
Then what's going on?
The world powers have always wanted to get their hands on the Middle East, but couldn't because they never had a good reason. They said it was to stop a terrorist regime, but of course they knew that the majority of their citizens wouldn't believe it, and therefore the citizens would try to find out why they are actually invading this country. So they created the Fila story.
A conspiracy to cover up a conspiracy.
A conspiracy to cover up a conspiracy?
The United States has a history of overthrowing regimes, not for the great or good of the people living there, but for their own interest. But now everybody knows the truth that when they commit these interventions, it is not because there is a dictator running the country, but for something else, usually for geopolitical purposes or resources such as oil. However, the United States made up the conspiracy theory that they were invading for Fila to cover up the real purpose. That way the public would never dig any further.
Then why did they try to kill me?
Because it wasn't that your discovery would prevent a company from making more money, it was because your discovery would debunk the cover-up story. No one would have believed that the military was in Egypt for minerals because they wouldn't need any.
And if the public didn't believe, then they would have really investigated why the military is here. Why is the military here?
There is something strange here in Egypt. There has been stories as late as last month, and the earliest from 2,000 years ago. There is a strange energy here, a vibration, something beyond this world. Supernatural, I tell you. We have seen things that can't be explained, felt things that words cannot express. You'll feel it. You'll understand it. Some things cannot be understood with logic. They can only, and I mean only, be understood through experience.
I need to get access to a military base.
Why?
I need to find out where all the military bases are.
Here, I have a map.
Sarah and Patrick looked at the map.
Look, there are no bases in the mountains.
Why is that important?
Fila is only found in mountainous areas. Mountains produce different minerals due to the processes involved in their formation. Many mountains are created by tectonic plate collisions, which push up deep earth materials and concentrate valuable minerals like gold, copper, and silver. The high pressures and temperatures involved in mountain formation can also lead to the creation of specific minerals, such as gemstones or ores like iron, bauxite, and in extremely rare cases, Fila.
But there are no bases there. We have to find where all these bases are located.
There was a bunch of red dots on the map representing the military bases in the country.
It looks like it's located surrounding this one area.
We need to go there.
They won't let us in. It is way too dangerous for me to drive within a kilometer there.
Okay, just drop us off the closest you can take us and we'll sneak in.
John hated helicopters. Too loud for something that isn't fast enough, he thought. He hated the Middle East. He's made several trips down here that he now spoke Arabic and Farsi, almost fluently. He touched down, and two soldiers approached him. "Hello, sir," one of them said.
What's the status?
We haven't found any of the suspects.
Well, get on it. I don't want to stay here too long.
You're not going to oversee the project even after we take out our targets? The special teams have been working at the location, sir, since we got here. Don't you want to see if we can accomplish the goal, sir?
Let me tell you something. Soldier, we, meaning us, the people of the world presently living, are most likely never going to achieve the project that you are currently working on. But we, the American military, the American people, or the American influence will be here long after we're 6 feet under.
Do you still want to see it, sir?
John stared at the man as if he was stupid.
What do you think? Get me there as soon as you can.
The dust was blowing in Patrick's face, but his eyes were too glued to the binoculars that it didn't faze him. He and Sarah were lying on their stomachs. Now that they are behind enemy lines overlooking the largest military base in Egypt that are surrounded by the only military bases in Egypt.
You find anything?
It seems as though they are trying to find something, like a secret door.
The pyramids were beautiful, he thought. One of the ancient wonders of the world. Tourists used to come here by the thousands at a time, and now it's only surrounded by dangerous top-secret forces with advanced military weapons.
What do you see?
Soldiers. Lots of soldiers. Anti-air guns, machine guns, long-distance missile launchers, radar. These are all items that bases have when they are on the defense.
Which means?
Which means that they are protecting something.
Why would they protect the pyramids? Do they really care that much about architecture?
I don't know, but it is quite clear to me now. The U.S. isn't here for a terrorist regime, nor is it here for the resources. I'm not sure why exactly they are here, but whatever it is, it's in those pyramids.
The sand was blowing in John's face pretty hard now that he was in the back seat in a convertible Jeep.
So have you made any progress with the pyramids?
No, sir. We have been trying for months. We've had the top experts in the world, but nothing has happened.
Sir, are you sure we're not wasting our time?
Son, if you knew what I knew, you would spend the remainder of your life trying to open the pyramids and you wouldn't regret it on your deathbed. I can't tell you much of the classified information, but I'll tell you this. Throughout history, every empire has tried to occupy the Middle East. You know why?
Resources such as the minerals and oil.
Nope.
The location? It is connected to every important area. Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, Asia, China, India, Iran, Suez Canal. Therefore, whoever controls the Middle East controls the trade routes, while keeping a close eye on the rest of the world, including their enemies?
Great answer, but no. Have you ever asked yourself, why did the beginning of the most important aspects of the human race begin in the Middle East? Think about it. The Out of Africa event, where chimpanzees left Africa and entered the Middle East, and then evolved to be humans so quickly. Brain size doubled faster than science can explain. How come human life began in the Middle East? How come the first civilizations began in the Middle East? How come the birth of religions took place in the Middle East? Why is it that we've been bombing these fuckers here for 40 years and not only do they not go away, their population multiplies? There's something located in this area of the world that no one knows, but it seems to not only know us, but may have even created us.
God. Are we looking for God?
Is it so we can become God? So the United States becomes God?
I don't know, boys, but I know this. It has been believed and classified evidence strongly supports this, that somewhere in the Middle East contains something that, if captured, can rule this world and beyond.
Beyond? What do you mean by that, sir?
Open the pyramid, soldier, and you'll find out firsthand.
You actually believe that?
Sarah, what we have been taught about the pyramids isn't for sure a fact. We just assumed that the pyramids were built for pharaohs, but there were never any pharaohs found. How can a group of people 2,000 years ago build something so big and vast that even modern builders today probably couldn't build? No amount of slaves could do this, and the Herodotus machine has been disproven.
I guess you're right. If there is one man in a village who is deemed the most qualified in a profession, and then had to answer a question that he didn't even know the answer to, he'll just guess the most likely answer, and nobody will question it, because he is the only one that knows anything in that field. Only 100s of years later, does another person dares to question the legitimacy of his answer. Richard Feynman did say, "I rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned."
Exactly. So how come historians from over 100 years ago are any different?
So, what do you believe?
Many experts believe that perhaps an advanced civilization built it before an apocalyptic event.
Why would an advanced people build 3 giant pyramids?
Nikola Tesla was obsessed with the pyramids. He was under the impression that the pyramids was created to create unlimited energy due to its location and structure. He also believed the numbers 3, 6, and 9 has something to do with it.
Yeah, but Patrick, Tesla also believed that aliens were telling him to build an earthquake machine.
Well, who's to say they didn't?
Tesla was a genius, Patrick. But he was also a little crazy. He had a habit of telling the events of his experiments before he even tested them. And sometimes he was wrong.
Yeah, but sometimes he was right, and in most cases you just need to be right once to change the world. Tesla once said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." The government confiscated his data after he died. Only they know the depth of his theories, but I believe what's going on out there might be a part of it.
This is too crazy, Patrick. I don't know.
Here's another quote for you, Sarah. "Truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't." Mark Twain. Sarah, the phyla material is the most important material today. Whoever occupies the material completely would be the equivalent of owning a nuke while everybody else has swords. The government has ditched its effort to pursue that mineral for whatever is in there. You found a way where you didn't even need that mineral, and not only did they not want it, they tried to kill you because it got in the way of their plans to obtain whatever is in there. Whatever is in there is something beyond our understanding and has power that is beyond our imagination. And there is only one way to find out what it is.
Sarah understood.
Well, how are we going to get in there? It's completely fortified.
Follow me.
Greg was sitting in his office, flabbergasted by what he has heard. His good friend and American hero Patrick O'Brien went back into combat to fight the terrorist regime in Egypt.
I know it's hard for you to hear, Greg, but apparently he left this morning.
It's just that Patrick was totally against the war. He kept asking me to get him a meeting with the head of state to voice his concern about it.
Well, he never addressed it publicly. When was the last time you saw him?
Right before his meeting with the head of state. There is something wrong here. He was against this war, and his meeting with the leaders was the first and only time he had ever showed his outrage against the war to anyone but me, and now he enlisted to go there? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, like I said, he never publicly addressed it, so nobody suspects anything. And I think it's best you don't either.
Sarah and Patrick were now disguising themselves in soldier uniforms, walking towards the pyramids. Patrick walked up to another soldier.
What's the status?
We've been trying to open this thing up, but nothing's doing. We got these historians, mythologists, and whatnot, but nothing's going on. At this point, I wouldn't even mind blowing the damn thing open with a fucking bazooka.
Patrick nodded and continued onward to the pyramids.
What was that all about? Opening the pyramids. There is already an entrance.
Clearly there is something ancient they are trying to unlock.
The sun was down, and the dawn was now present.
There's too many lights. They're going to notice us if it's not dark enough.
There are no power lines around the area. They must be using a generator. If you give me enough time, I can shut it off and turn this whole area black. No one will see a thing except those with the flashlights.
We don't just want it off. We want it to not be turned on again.
I can do that. I just need to know where it is.
I know where they usually hide it.
Sarah and Patrick made their way to one of the main tents.
There are too many people there.
Patrick noticed a turret at a distance away.
Once everybody heads towards the noise, move to the generator. Once you shut off the power, meet me behind the eastern pyramid.
Patrick got on the gun turret and fired multiple rounds into the distance. The sound of the gun turret caused panic, and all the soldiers started rushing towards the noise. "What's going on?" one of the soldiers asked.
There was movement from that area.
Where?
The power went out.
What the hell?
What's going on?
Okay, everyone in position. Power is out.
All the soldiers scattered to their positions while Patrick made his way to the rendezvous point to meet Sarah.
How are we going to open up the pyramids?
Have you heard of the Field of Reeds?
No.
It's the paradise and the afterlife of Egyptian mythology. The only way it was believed to enter the Field of Reeds was through a series of tests. The most important one being the weighing of hearts compared to a mayat or an ostrich feather, and if the heart is lighter or equal weight to the ostrich feather, you enter the gates of paradise. If your heart is too heavy, that means you have done terrible things and cannot enter the Field of Reeds. The heart represented the souls as they were believed to be the same. The soul was represented by three categories, the Ka, Ba, and Ak. The symbol for Ka was upraised arms, the statue of Ba was bird with a human head, and the Ak was an ibis. It was believed that the Field of Reeds lied in the east where the sun sets.
Patrick and Sarah started moving around the pyramids, hiding away from suspicion.
We have to find the east side of the pyramid.
The pair made it to the eastern side, and Patrick started scanning the walls.
369. 369.
What are you looking for?
Nikola Tesla was also fascinated with the numbers 3, 6, 9. He would drive around a building 3 times before entering it. He thought those numbers were key to the building blocks of the universe and could potentially be used to unlock secrets of the universe.
So you're looking for measurements of 3, 6, and 9.
Yes.
Sarah thought for a moment and then started climbing the pyramid.
What are you doing?
I think the numbers 3, 6, 9 weren't coordinates or a code, but in this situation, just one number. These limestones are big enough for an entrance. Maybe we just need to find the 369th limestone that was placed here.
How are we going to do that?
Mythology might be your area, but math is mine. You say that the East symbolized birth, right?
Correct. That would probably make the West death.
So they must have laid the limestone from east to west. That must mean it's up here.
Sarah started climbing. Patrick followed her up the pyramids until she started searching thoroughly.
Here,
She said, pointing to a part of a limestone.
the 369th block that was laid.
Are you sure?
Look.
Patrick wiped the dust off of the limestone that Sarah located. There was an ancient painting of a river that led to 3 symbols: a hawk with a human head, an upraised arms symbol, and an ibis.
Do you know the most important thing to the Egyptians?
The Nile River?
The Nile River was symbolic with death, or the entrance to another world. The Field of Reeds was based off of the Nile. The story of Osiris, who was the god of death, was believed to be dismembered by his brother Seth, and tossed into the Nile but was repaired again and represented the regeneration of life.
Patrick reached into his pocket and pulled out the ostrich feather that his contact gave him in the taxi.
The driver said that the ostrich feather represented truth in ancient Egypt.
The measurement of the heart.
Patrick dragged his hand through the painting of the Nile with the ostrich feather and pressed into the symbol of the Baka and Ak. But nothing happened. A vision hit Patrick suddenly of all the atrocities he participated in while he was in Malaysia, and the image of the little Indonesian girl crying while he was raising his gun towards the child. Patrick realized what this meant. His heart wasn't light enough. The more bad things a person does, the heavier their heart is, and Patrick's heavier than the feather, meaning it was too heavy to enter. He turned to Sarah.
You have to go up.
Sarah took the feather and pressed it against the symbols.
By the way, you didn't finish explaining the Nile River and Egyptians' belief in death.
The Egyptians would send their deceased down the Nile River in flames, symbolic to the path to the afterlife.
Or the New World.
Sarah dragged the feather down the Nile, painted on the limestone, as if it was the deceased body floating down the river into the New World. And pressed against the symbols, a green light started spreading on the limestone from the position of her hand, and the limestones started to move apart, leaving an entrance open. Sarah and Patrick looked at each other. No one said a word, but understood what the other was thinking. Both of them then looked into the entrance and entered the pyramid.
So you have not talked to Patrick since 2 days ago?
No, last I saw, he was talking with that robotics woman.
Robotics woman?
Yeah, she was invited here for a presentation about the safety of AI or something. I don't know.
Aren't these protests against the war due to some kind of resource there that has to do with robots or something?
That's what everybody believes?
It's funny how back in the day the government would attack those who opposed their actions, and now they just shrug their shoulders whenever they're criticized.
Right? It's a lot different this time. It's almost like they want us to believe it's for the minerals.
Greg thought about it for a moment. He realized that the first report of minerals being in Egypt was not by a small media company, an independent one or a foreign one. It came from the mainstream media outlets in the U.S. that does all the propaganda. The same propaganda machine that lied about all the previous nefarious activities from the government. Why would the government's mouthpiece report something that would ruin the citizens' support for their war? Especially 1 month before declaring Egypt was ruled by a terrorist regime.
Susan?
Yes, Greg?
Since the tension between Egypt and the U.S. began, have you noticed any change in the stock market?
Well, the weapons manufacturers and the company that mines Fila have risen significantly.
Greg was thinking to himself, trying to put the clues together. Why did the propaganda machine fool themselves? Was it a mistake? Why was Patrick in Egypt? And did the robotics expert have something to do with it? Greg was thinking that he may be in a
Greg?
Yeah?
I also found that the transportation companies have risen by quite a lot.
Transportation?
Mostly, it has been invested in space-related companies. That's because the Space Force budget was increased by 10.
What? Why haven't I heard of this?
It wasn't deemed important enough to be reported by the mainstream.
When was this?
7 months ago.
What date, specifically?
I think it was April 12th. Why? What's going on?
That's the same day the Fila report was released.
Sarah and Patrick walked slowly through the pyramids. It was mostly a staircase going downward. They've been heading downward for quite some time. They used their flashlights to scan the walls on their way down. The walls were displayed some of the most unique paintings and markings they've ever seen. They saw carvings of several unknown languages that has never been seen on history. So many of what was on that wall was so beyond the ability of the average human of the current world. The pair kept walking downward.
I think we're below ground level.
The air was suddenly cool, it was dark, and their flashlights were losing power. They kept marching down, and suddenly they reached the bottom of the staircase. Patrick stepped onto the floor and noticed how it felt on his feet. It wasn't limestone, it wasn't rock, dirt, or sand. It was metal. Not only metal, but new metal. Newer than the metal currently.
This was not built by the Egyptians.
Sarah and Patrick continued to walk down the path that was leading them. Out of nowhere, green lights along the hallway flashed. The hallway was long. The green light was the same as the light that flashed when the pyramid opened. It was a unique light. It wasn't like the usual artificial light, but natural, almost like sunlight. Sarah and Patrick walked down the hallway. It was like walking through a hallway from the future. They continued down the path until they reached a door. Before any of them could move a muscle, the door slid open, and inside the door was pure darkness. Sarah and Patrick walked in. John was starting to panic.
2 of my soldiers were found unconscious with their uniforms and weapons missing?
Yes, sir. The men are fine now.
Really? Are you sure they're fine? Because last I checked, they don't have any fucking guns.
Sir, we found something. We found an opening in the pyramids.
Son, it better not be the one for tourists, I swear.
No, sir. It's nothing like we've seen before.
Take me there now. Hurry up. Everybody on me.
It was dark. Dangerously dark. Patrick was trying to keep his balance. It seemed as though the floor was on an angle. Sarah followed closely behind. She was on all fours, feeling the surface. She looked like a blind person searching for her glasses that she dropped on the floor. Patrick couldn't tell, though, since it was too dark to see. Then slowly, it got lighter. No lights turned on, but somehow it got more visible. Patrick could see Sarah, and Sarah could see Patrick. That gave them enough relief. They now could see the floor that they were walking on. It was indeed on an angle. They looked around. The room was huge. The distance between the ends of the room must have been at least half a kilometer long. Patrick kept looking around, scanning the entire room, scanning the floor. It was circular-shaped, he thought, sort of like a... He paused. He had just realized where he was. He couldn't believe it. Patrick has been around the most craziest circumstances before. He has seen things and experienced things that have changed his life forever. But this? He hasn't witnessed anything like this before.
Sarah?
Yeah?
Just to let you know, we're on a spacecraft right now. An alien spacecraft.
Hurry in there. Don't know how much time we have before it closes. Go, go, go!
John was yelling like he has never yelled before. All the soldiers at the site were now entering the pyramid one by one.
Sir, what do you want us to do when we go in?
Find who's ever in there, hold them and wait for me. I'm going in.
Oh my God. What is this place supposed to be? Why is it here? What does this all mean?
I have no idea. I literally have no idea.
Patrick started walking around the surface of the ship.
We should try to go inside. Where could the entrance be?
I don't think there is an entrance.
What do you mean?
The human race doesn't have a human on Mars. We don't know if it's safe or not. So we send a robot with a camera on it for us to look around instead before we put a man there. What makes you think this is any different? Perhaps this is just artificial intelligence. A robot from another universe.
It's been here for earlier than 3,000 years. Some samples suggest it's been here longer than 12,000 years. Yet where we're at, what we're standing on, is more advanced than anything we have ever seen. This is 12,000 years old, yet its technology is closer to 12,000 years into the future.
Maybe it is from the future. There's a popular poem. There once was a girl named Bright, who can travel faster than light. She left one day in a particular way, and arrived the previous night. What if this ship is so advanced that it can travel as fast or even faster than the speed of light, and then made its way back in time?
Patrick was so puzzled, he didn't know if this was from an advanced civilization from over 12,000 years ago, a ship that traveled back in time, an alien spacecraft, or somehow all three at once. Whatever it was, it wasn't of this current world. This whole underground facility wasn't. The green lights, the hallway. What was this place?
We need to keep searching. Maybe we'll find a clue.
Sarah agreed with Patrick. They came so far, they might as well see how far they can push it. She hasn't eaten much in days, neither of them have, but they are the only two people in the world that are in the situation they are in now, and the only two in the world that understands what each other has experienced. They had to make the most of it.
Patrick, we should try to...
A bullet just missed Sarah.
Get down!
Sarah and Patrick hid around the surface of the spacecraft. Multiple soldiers were now firing toward them. John was rushing down the staircase now that he heard gunshots. "Sir!" yelled a soldier from near the bottom of the staircase.
What?
It's the targets.
Ignore what I said earlier. Kill them. Take out the targets. They're terrorists.
Patrick and Sarah were hiding on the other side of the craft. Soldiers were now on the platform coming closer to their location. Patrick saw a tunnel across where Sarah and Patrick were taking cover.
Sarah, there's a tunnel. Run across and jump on the other side. I'll be over there.
Patrick, I can't...
Go, I'll cover you.
Sarah sprinted toward the tunnel. Patrick postured up and shot two of the soldiers, taking them out, before reloading and shooting another.
Patrick.
Patrick looked back and saw Sarah now off the ship and at the entrance of the tunnel. Patrick was about to follow her, but there were too many of them. Patrick decided he was going to hold off the men for Sarah to escape. Patrick continued to fire, taking out as many soldiers as he can. He ran out of bullets, and more of them were coming. This is it, Patrick thought, but he knew it was worth it. As the men came flooding towards him, Patrick decided he was going to go down swinging. He closed his eyes, turned, and towards the oncoming men. But mysteriously, they all stopped. Patrick stopped. Everything just stopped. Everything was frozen. Even the bullets that were shot were frozen. Suddenly, the walls started crumbling. The whole area was collapsing beneath them. Soldiers who weren't on the surface of the ship were now falling into the abyss beneath them. Sarah knew what was happening. The spacecraft was turned on. Time had stopped for whoever was in contact with the spacecraft, and everyone who was off of it was getting crushed with the rest of the facility. The spacecraft was in a shape of a flying saucer, and it was starting to spin. The spinning of the ship forced Patrick and the soldiers off of the ship into the abyss below, but Patrick landed on the platform where Sarah was.
We gotta go now,
Sarah said as she was helping Patrick up to his feet.
What happened? Am I dead? I was just getting shot at by...
No time to explain. We gotta go. The whole place is going to collapse on us.
The rumbling of the pyramid scared John.
I'm getting out of here.
John made his way outside the pyramid, strapped himself to one of the ropes, and slid all the way down to the surface.
Start it up!
He yelled to the helicopter pilot.
We're getting out of here.
He grabbed one of his officers.
Tell the whole unit we're evacuating the entire goddamn area.
Sarah and Patrick were running for their lives through the tunnel while the roof was caving in close behind them. They arrived at a staircase and quickly ran up as the staircase started to collapse behind their last step. They just saw a wall ahead of them. Patrick lowered his shoulder and due to the structure falling apart, was able to break through the wall, with Sarah close behind. They were inside another tomb, but saw daylight and continued to run towards it, and outside of what was the Sphinx. They kept on running until they heard a big explosion that knocked both of them off their feet. They turned around and saw the destruction of the Great Pyramids of Giza, and out of the large pyramid emerged the giant flying saucer into the air. It was hovering above Sarah and Patrick. It just remained there hundreds of feet in the air, with the bottom surface still spinning. Then, two more smaller spacecrafts emerged, one from each of the remaining two pyramids, and like the large spacecraft, it just sat hundreds of feet in the air, behind the large one. It was as if the three were staring at both Sarah and Patrick. Suddenly, the destruction was paused. Time had stopped once again, in the area that was collapsing, and the three spacecrafts just hovered in the air, staring at Sarah and Patrick. John was watching at a distance from the helicopter, absolutely shocked, even though no verbal communication was made by the spacecraft. It felt as though Patrick and Sarah received a message from the three spacecrafts. Soon the three aircrafts started emulating a green light, the same green lights from the entrance and the hallway. Suddenly, the three flying objects in a blink of an eye just disappeared. Then, the collapsing continued. Sarah and Patrick started sprinting once again, but this time the destruction from below was too fast, and both fell underneath the rubble of the desert.
Are you sure?
I swear my life on it.
John was pacing around the room.
What I saw was unlike anything that was ever written, recorded, or seen, or even fucking imagined.
John was starting to lose it. What he saw at the pyramids wasn't meant to be seen, and his mind couldn't take it. He was breaking. His brain was fried. He feels as though his body has aged 20 years since what happened.
You're telling us time stopped?
Yes, but only in the area that was destructing. The fucking limestones were sitting in midair, not moving, while three goddamn UFOs were hovering above with parts of their ship clearly spinning.
So they could basically freeze reality in any place while time moves on in other areas?
I think so. I don't know. I don't know any fucking thing anymore.
John, relax. We need to get him help. I've never seen him like this in my life.
Wait, we need more information. Is there anything that we can use? Clearly it can fly faster than light speed. By the sounds of it, doesn't even travel, but just transports itself to any part of the universe.
Or any universe.
But it's gone now. And the men are searching through the rubble, but haven't found much that we could use. But now we know the prophecies were true.
What about Mr. Medal of Honor and the girl?
There has been no sign of them. I'm assuming they died from the destruction of the landscape around them.
We need to make sure they're taken out. If we find out they're alive, we kill them fast before they do any more damage.
The room agreed.
Maybe not.
What are you talking about? They just killed our goddamn plans. We should be dominating not just our planet, but the solar system. Fuck the Middle East, Asia, Europe, who gives a shit? We would have occupied Mars and built another civilization there. We could have went to Saturn and in 1 second collected enough diamonds to make every person on the planet a fucking billionaire, and we would have had it for ourselves. We could have invaded the next exoplanet, 200 million light years away, time travel to 1930, and obliterate the Soviets or enslave them. Shit. Take your pick.
If it wasn't for those two, we wouldn't have opened the pyramids. For thousands of years, every empire powerful enough to invade the Middle East did. Because they were searching for something there, and we had to rewrite history to hide why they were really there. All that research for thousands of years just to find where it's located, you'd think opening it would have taken another 1,000, hell, maybe even 2,000. But those two together found it in one night. Makes you think what else they are capable of.
What are you thinking of keeping them alive?
Remember our former Secretary of State, Donald Rumsfeld?
Oh, you old Donnie. What about him?
Remember his famous quote that he pulled out of his ass that one time? There are known knowns known unknowns and unknown unknowns. The things that we don't know that we don't know. The last part is what will lead to our goals, but we can't do it without those two. There is so much of this world that we don't know, and perhaps those two can be used to solve it.
So what now? We're going to hire them now?
No. We'll just find a way to point them in the direction we want them to go.
That's if they're still alive.
Yeah, that's if they're still alive.
Out in the aftermath of the destruction of the pyramids and the collapse of the surface, out of the pile of sand, a hand pops out and pulls the rest of the body out of the sand. Once he was out, Patrick reached his hand below to where it just was and pulls Sarah to the surface. Both of them got to their feet.
So, how did you find that 369th limestone?
Sarah smiled. Both of them started walking, with the destruction of the pyramids behind them.